You're listening to The Support Report with Be Present, where we share real stories from young adults and how support changed their lives.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning into another episode of The Support Report. We are Be Present. I'm your host, Justin Peters, and joined by my fabulous co-host, Kiara Riga. Kiara, how are you?
I'm not bad, Justin. It's been a while. How are you doing?
I feel a little rusty on mic right now, don't you?
A little bit, yeah. There's been a lot happening in the past couple months.
Give me a highlight, a low light from the end of summer for you.
Yeah, I've been going through it. I've had disease progression twice since March. So had radiation, found more spots. I'm now on my second line of treatment, and getting side effects under control has been a whole hell of a thing, but still been able to travel. We made it up to Mendocino for our anniversary. We went to Cabo, spent my cancerversary glamping in Big Sur. So trying to make the most of it regardless, per usual.
Oh, man. Well, sorry to hear about that. What's since we can always be super honest and open on this kind of forum too, what's like a good response to a cancer friend that kind of responds whenever you ask that? When I asked a similar question, what would be a preference there? Is it a sorry or hate to hear that, or
yeah, I'm so sorry is totally fine. Just nothing that makes it be like, well, at least you're still traveling, or like I can say that, but nobody else can say that, you know? But otherwise, I think just be empathetic, understand that like you're not going to understand it, and yeah, just try to relate on a human level, I think.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I'm glad you did get to do some traveling. It sounds like you've had some fun adventures through the summer, which I know is super important to you. But let's get into business. We got a guest with us today, which I'm super stoked about. You want to introduce her?
Absolutely. I am so excited about our guest today. So joining us today is Megsie Chase, also known as Megsie or Megsie Warrior. She is known for her blog, Life on the Cancer Train, which gives a raw, authentic view into her life after breast cancer, often with a humorous twist. Megsie is a powerful public speaker and advocate, and her work has been featured in a whole host of publications from Grit Health, IHadCancer.com, and most recently she was featured on an episode of Stories from the Stage, which was aired nationally on PBS. That's incredible.
Nice.
Megsie, welcome to the podcast. We're so excited to have you.
My gosh. Hello. I'm so excited to be with y'all. And yeah, I was like, who are you talking about? Wow, that's pretty cool.
Get out of here.
The bio really wrote itself there. It was a lot of impressive. I was editing things out for length. You've done a lot of great stuff in the community.
Yeah, I feel like we could have had just an entire podcast episode just reading Megsie's bio here. So Megsie, why don't you kick things off? Tell us a little bit about your cancer story, kind of where you entered and where you're at now.
Sure. So the thing is, I always knew I would get cancer. And again, it's not because I'm some sort of like dark person here, but I literally come from a family of cancer. My mother had ovarian cancer at 28 when she was pregnant with me. And it already took my parents like 8 years to even get pregnant. They did IVF, and I believe it was the third round. The miracle, me. But during her third month, ovarian cancer. And like, that's why our bond is so tight. And so growing up, the joke of the family was I looked nothing like my mother externally, but internally I got all of it, like all of it. And so I thought for years I would end up with ovarian or cervical because my maternal grandmother also had cervical cancer at 45. So I'm like, just bring it. Like, I know it's coming. So when I started to have very weird symptoms, and it's very important that I say that because they were different than, my white counterparts. My hair, which was my pride and joy. Like right now, you see these chemo curls, like my hair legit came back curly. I'd never wanted curly hair. Do I rock it? Of course. But I had straight hair to my shoulders. And it was thick, and it started falling out on the left side. And, then I started to get like these weird green bruises and like nothing about my breast. And I was able to have a mammogram early. And they were like, hey, you're good. Come back when you're 40. So I didn't think anything else of it. And because nothing was around the breast, no one thought about it. And I kept pushing for over 2.5 years, like these weird symptoms. I was like, well, something's wrong, because my Nana, who was a registered nurse, she always taught us it's your patient right to be pushy and know your body. And I knew something was wrong because I started gaining all this weight. I mean, it was just like, what is happening? And then eventually I felt it. In fact, this week, the week of 9/11 is my cancerversary week. I had the biopsy on 9/11/2015, and that was a Friday back then. And I remember I purposely scheduled it as like at 4:30 in the afternoon because I didn't want to have to go back to work. And they told me, hey, we'll probably have the results by, Tuesday or Wednesday. So I go into work, not even thinking about it. I'm in my cubicle. And so right now I'm having a lot of flashbacks of that cancer PTSD. Of everything from that moment, just remembering. And I used to work for iHeartRadio. So I was literally listening to a commercial and I was like all annoyed. I'm like, it's too long, blah, blah, blah. And I'm typing up an email, my phone rings and I almost didn't answer it, because I'm like, I don't know who that is. And I was not expecting anything on a Monday and it was at 3:05 p.m. And because of time and the industry I was in, I'm very aware of the time. And I was like, I don't know that, but I'll just answer. And it was my doctor. And I was like, stop, wait, don't even say a word. Because I did not want to have this call in my cubicle. So I go like rushing down the hall into an empty conference room. And she's like, first of all, her name is Dr. Gray. And I have to say that because I was like, really? Like from Grey's Anatomy? I was like, legit? She goes, yes. And she's like, I should have kept my maiden name. Because I was like, okay. I was like, if your first name is Meredith, I don't know. But anyway, she was like, Megan Claire, you have invasive lobular breast cancer. And I was like, I have what? Wait, what? What? And then, started to get hysterical. And she like snapped me back and goes, Megan Claire, I need you to get a pen and paper and take down some information. And I was like, okay. So then I go rushing back, and I'm a bit of I'm going to say drama queen. I mean, I'm slightly dramatic. So everyone's like, professionally, I would go by MC for short also. And they're like, MC, what are you doing? I'm like, yeah, in a minute. And I'm like rushing back. And she's telling me all this. And afterward, I immediately call my mother and I'm like, Mother, oh my God. And the guilt she felt because of that link between breast and ovarian. And this is 2 months after my 39th birthday. So I'm at the older end of the AYA. And so it was very weird to be called an AYA young adult. I was like, what? And that's when I learned about this whole underrepresented category and realized how hard it was. And no wonder I wasn't being taken seriously. You're too young for this. Just lose weight. Just do this. And no one believed me. And now it just started to make so much sense. And that's how I ultimately became Warrior Megsie breast cancer patient.
Wow, that's quite a story. I'm so sorry. I went through a very similar thing, and I love what your grandmother told you, that it's your patient, right? That is incredible, and I wish more of us had heard that. Thank you so much for sharing your story. So let's get into a little bit of, you became Warrior Megsie. What made you decide to start your blog to kind of become more of an advocate through the cancer space?
Yeah, like I never even had the nickname Megsie, and I'm like, it's so cute. Like, how did that happen? But anyway, it was about 6 months once I was quote unquote in the survivorship stage, and I remember my oncologist told me at the time, hey, you might feel a little depression because you're not going to see me all the time. It's only, every 3 months. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, 6 months later, I'm like, a little depression? a little depression. Is she crazy? Like, hello, it's called depression, anxiety, rage. Like, I was mad. And as someone who is very verbal, and usually never lacking for words, for the first time ever, I couldn't verbalize what I was experiencing. And as you know, it's funny, I used to never call myself a writer, but obviously I am a writer. It's been my whole degree, and I have like 30 plus journals in my closet. So I was like, whatever. But I had noticed when I was trying to find resources that everything was about gratitude. And yes, I have gratitude and all of that. But I was like, why is no one talking about like just that rage? Like, I was just so angry because it really, like, you know, changed my life. And so I was like, I'm just going to start a blog. And I never thought to start a blog before. And when I was thinking of the name Life on the Cancer Train, I feel like there's like a window for those where their treatment does end, because I'm always thinking about my stage 4 peeps where they have ongoing treatments. I'm very sensitive in the way I frame that. Is this isn't over. And it's actually never over, because I was having like other side effects from all the chemo and radiation and the multiple surgeries that was happening later. And I was like, what is this? And so I realized it was kind of like a train. It just keeps going. And I don't know what that final destination is. Like, I want off, but it won't like stop. And sometimes it's a rough terrain and other times it's kind of smooth. And then, so that's where the title of it came. And then I was like, I'm just going to blog to hold myself accountable, engage my mental health. And I was like, maybe it'll help, like 1 or 2 other people. That was how it started. And I, as you said earlier, Kiara, I am very raw and honest in it. And then all of a sudden it just started growing because I felt, it seems like a lot of people felt like they almost needed permission to kind of sit in that rage, anger, frustration, fear, and be able to like process it. And I feel like my blog and my writing, which also morphed more into video as well, start to resonate with people of all genders and all cancers, because we have a lot of the same shared experiences. And I felt, this is great if I'm helping other people. And to this day, which is why I have a bit of writer's block right now, like I write for me. And I think that's why it comes across as authentic, because I'm not writing for clicks, and oh, please retweet me or whatever Twitter is now. I write and I want to make sure that it is authentic, because that is how it will resonate. And then when my hair came back curly with these chemo curls, like I legit thought, okay, maybe this is like it'll go back to pre-cancer hair after a year, and it never did. I was like, okay, this is legit permanent. And so a cancer friend, I've never met her, but she's fabulous. And she goes, oh, you look so Megsie, because I started wearing fascinators. For those who are British, it's what, like those cool hats and things are called fascinators. And someone gifted me with one. And I was like, oh, I love this. Because I didn't feel feminine with this short hair. Now it's grown a lot. So now I feel a little bit more feminine. But after that, a friend goes, you look so Megsie. I was like, oh, I do look so Megsie. I am Megsie. I'm Warrior Megsie. And that was how that all came about.
I love that so much. I saw so many of the fascinators and fun headbands all over your blog, and I really liked one of the posts that you shared about, you still like pink because you liked it pre-cancer, and
that's right.
That doesn't mean it's we're not going to do pink washing, but we can still love pink, which I feel like is a weird dichotomy in the breast cancer space. So
yes.
I love that.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, so pink washing happens every October when breast cancer awareness month comes around. where companies will slap a pink ribbon on something and say, oh, we're donating a portion of the proceeds. Come to find out it's like $5,000 when they've made like hundreds of thousands of dollars or something along those lines. And so it's turned into a huge thing of everyone hates pink, but pink's been my favorite color since pre-breast cancer. And so how do I go about, having everything pink, but also not be really into pink? Like it's an interesting dichotomy. I don't know how you've experienced that, Megsie.
I mean, it's the same, but that's the thing. I was like, well, the shade of pink that's my favorite is not the breast cancer pink. Because I'm like, it's like Blush and Bashful from Still Magnolias. It's like there are multiple shades. And yes, y'all, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. So if you hear a bit of Southern, that's where that's coming from. But that was how I was able to separate it, because I was like, shoot, I've had tiaras and feather boas and butterfly wings and stuff in my closet well before breast cancer. So I'm going to keep wearing those because that's part of me. And I always like to tell people, like, your cancer experience cannot take away the essence of you. Like, it can change a lot and can physically take away a lot, but the essence of you, your personality is there.
I love that. And I feel like in some ways it even brings you more to the essence of you. At least that was my experience. I'd love to talk a little bit about what you were sharing with, cancer doesn't end when treatment does. I think when I entered this cancer space, that was one of the most surprising things that I heard. You always think like, oh, you're going to finish treatment and you're going to run marathons and everything's going to be great because you're, quote, cancer free. Obviously, our podcast is focused very much on supporters of cancer patients and survivors. And so I would love to hear kind of what were the things that you didn't expect with this survivorship phase now that your treatment's over? How did the people in your life support you in a great way or a not so great way? How did you bridge that gap, and what was really surprising to you?
Oh, that is like such a good question, and I noticed the way I talked about it changed. So initially, like right after the surgeries, before I actually started radiation. So I had 16 rounds of chemo first, and then I had my surgeries, and then I had 33 rounds of radiation. But I remember when I went back to work after the surgeries, but like maybe a month before I was supposed to start radiation, I was all like, yes, I'm cancer free. I beat this. Like, I used all of the like typical descriptions of like a survivor. I was like, I beat this. And everyone, of course, just came out with all these like gifts and, tons of people from even like my high school days. I was like, what? I've never even talked to you before. But anyway, but thank you for the generosity. But like everyone came out. And then as I started to process what just happened, because when you're in active treatment, you're in fight or flight mode the whole time. I was like, what the heck just happened? Like, wait a minute. Like, all of a sudden, all of that, like, yes, I did it, started to just disappear. And it was like the rage. And then I had a really hard time communicating with those outside of cancer land. That's what I call it. And I noticed that I started to say, quote unquote, survivorship stage. And then I started, saying it's not really over. And everyone's like, well, you need to just feel grateful. And I started to feel resentful every time someone would say that to me, or at least your hair came back. Well, yes. I'm glad I do have a full head of hair, but I miss the hair that I had for 10 million years. Every time I look in the mirror, it is trauma. Like, it is a constant reminder. And this is permanent because we're going on 7 years. And I noticed that I just couldn't talk with people. And I was like, I've got to find support. And it was really hard in Atlanta to find local support. And because I tried that avenue first, and I was like, I didn't know anyone when I was going through it who was my age. I mean, I walk in that infusion room and I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening? I'm like a baby in here. But then I did meet some people, and then the fact that I kept being called a young adult, I was like, let me research, see what I can find for some support, because I was like, I need to talk to others and to also help me process this, because I felt very alone and very isolated. And I just could no longer talk about like trivial things. And, I found my people, in the young adult and the AYA cancer community. I call them my cancer besties, like the ones where it's just amazing with that support. And it's funny, I'm like, I may not know your middle name, but darn it, I know like your bowel movement habits. And I know that makes you, nauseous. And it's just amazing. The connections are so deep so quickly, and you're just able to talk about it and not have to constantly explain why you feel a certain way. And so though I still have friends outside of Cancerland, everything I do and say, and I even changed my career to even be working in this space, it is always about cancer, because there's never a day that goes by that I'm not thinking about it because of the permanent side effects that I now have to deal with. And I can't ever forget it because the pain reminds me every single day.
So to jump off of that too, is it a challenge both working in the space and being a content creator in the space, and also trying to go through your own healing journey? It sounds like it's a lot. It's hard to forget about when it's always in front of your face, huh?
That's a darn. Oh, yeah. I'm actually feeling some of that today. It can be hard, especially because I do work in the cancer space, in breast cancer, no less. And sometimes it does become hard. And I do have to just kind of step away. And so a way that I do that is I make sure that my work area is different. And this, where I am now, is my creative space and area. Like in the beginning, when I started working in the breast cancer space and not just an advocate, I used to keep them like in the same area. And that's when I realized, no, this is starting to spill over, because it's like, okay, I now know a little bit too much, and that can have a negative impact on me as a content creator and my writing. And so I was like, we got to change spaces. And so now it's like far away enough that I can be like, oh, okay, over here is where I can really let it loose and really speak my mind. Because that's the thing too. It's hard when you have to police yourself of what you say when you're working in that space. But as Warrior Megsie, I'll say whatever the heck I want to say.
Love that. Love that. And what ways have you found to practice kind of self-care beyond splitting these out, right? Because obviously, if you're living this 24/7, like, you've got to have a way to help yourself through it.
Oh, yes. So, I am all about theater. I love the arts. Like, I'm like, why am I not on stage right now?
You should be. You should be.
No, seriously, thank you. But I love that. And so actually something really cool, aside from the PBS thing, like leading up to the PBS storytelling thing, is I was like, I haven't taken an acting class in like years. And I mean like a hot minute. But I was scared because of chemo brain. I really suffered from chemo brain, or brain fog, because even if you haven't had chemo, your body's still going through trauma. And so it can really affect your short-term memory. And I worked really hard for like 3 years and one of my tips is to read out loud, because and read something that's like really highbrow, like you have to concentrate. And I was finally able to read for like 30 minutes at a time without losing concentration, and reading out loud and actually like comprehending, because I feel like chemo brain's almost like a brain injury, so to speak, of it just disappears. It's not like, oh, I forgot and then it comes back. It does not come back. And so I did that for like 3 years. And finally I was like, I feel really like myself. I need to take an acting class. And so I did. I went to like our main big theater and took acting one. And I got to tell you, that was a moment. And I was very open about it because our final class, we had a scene partner, and our teacher, our instructor, she didn't realize that she assigned us the same role to memorize. So I come in, had it, like, yeah. And then the other girl's like, wait, so did I. I was like, are you kidding? I was like, okay, well, we've got 45 minutes. So I will memorize this other one and
Wow.
you do the same, and we block it, and we all had to perform it, right? It wasn't that I just like memorized it. I mean, like, I performed it. And more importantly, I trusted my memory, but I had to memorize in a different way than I did pre-cancer because of the whole chemo brain. And so, like, it was just such a moment. I'm get like a little teary-eyed because it let me know, oh my God, I'm back, like somewhat back. I may not be back the way I thought I would be, but that part, because I learned a different way, I had to modify what I was doing. It worked, and no one even knew that that's what happened until like afterward we got this great feedback, and I was like, yeah, y'all had to memorize this in like 45 minutes, and they were like, wait, what? And it was just such a moment for me as a cancer survivor, breast cancer survivor who has gone through so much physically. It was a cool moment.
I love that story about your acting class. I think that's incredible. Those little moments of like, oh yeah, I'm back. Those are huge. Over Memorial Day weekend, we went up to Denver, and I really wanted to hike in Rocky Mountain National Park, but like I had just finished radiation. I didn't know, how my body was going to handle it. I hiked 8 miles at 10,000 feet of elevation, and I was like, your girl is back. Like,
yes.
I had to take a lot of breaks, and I was huffing that canned oxygen, but like that, I mean, I rode that high for months. It felt so good.
Yes, as well it should, right? I mean, and that's the thing too. I mean, you can't escape like certain changes that it has made, and some of them are permanent. And I do deal with like survivor's guilt, but sometimes I have survivor envy. And someone was like, what do you mean by that? I was like, well, there's some people that are able to go back to how they were pre-cancer, like with their strength, with their hair, their memory comes back, like they're able to do that. And I was like, gosh, I really wish I could. I wish I could be one of those that's climbing mountains, but I know physically I am very limited now. But I was like, you know what? In my brain, that's still working pretty okay. And I had to like find other ways to remind myself of the things that I truly loved, and not feel like I could no longer do certain things anymore. That weren't necessarily like super physical, like acting and being on stage. Even standing for a while was hard because of chemo-induced peripheral neuropathy, but I did it. And I was like, okay, I can do it in like small chunks. So that's what I mean by survivor envy.
Did you take another step on the acting class? Are you taking acting too, or are we gonna see Broadway at some point in time?
Oh my gosh, right. I really do want to take another acting class, but time. But doing the storytelling thing on PBS, that was literally a dream come true.
Y'all, can you explain it a little bit? Kind of like what happened?
Like, what were you talking about, Megsie? Okay, so it was through an organization called Count Me In. And they're an amazing organization for genetic testing. And they had this like section in their organization called Amplifying Black Voices. And so they asked certain number of Black patients. It was all Black patients and then one Latino. We all had different cancers, and we worked with a story coach. And it was telling an element of our story for 7 minutes, memorized.
Wow.
in front of a live studio audience
That's so
in
scary.
Boston. Yeah. And so I was like, of course, I'm like, yes, theater. But it was awesomely challenging because it was something I'd never done before. I felt to a whole new level. It actually makes me a better editor now. But anyway, I worked with the story coach. We all did, and we were able to like really hone it down and really draw people in. And even though I'm from Atlanta, it was so cool that I had friends who lived in Boston come out for it. Like,
Cool.
I thought to myself, that's how awesome the cancer community and the AYA cancer community is, that they're like, hey, we'll show up if you're here. And yeah, it was about 120, 130 people there. And the funny part is I had no memory. Like, I remember walking up on the stage, counting backwards to 10 at the microphone, because you had to stay like in your place in the microphone. And I said my first line, and then all I remember is walking off. And I was like, and then I was like, oh my God, what happened? But then all these people start coming to me and they're crying and they're hugging, because that was the final one of that night of recording.
Cool.
And I was in so much pain by that point. I was just like, oh my God. But I brought the energy, but it was just like, so people are crying. So I was like, okay, if I made people cry, I think that's a good thing. So it was ultimately aired on PBS in June.
Did you rewatch it?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I had like a whole little watch party. And like I was recording myself. Like I was like, watching myself. Like, yeah, I'm such a dork. Because it was like a whole bunch of interviews too. And it was 2 separate episodes. One was for those living with cancer who are metastatic or had a recurrence. And then the other episode, which I was in, was Beyond Cancer, the survivorship. And so, we had interviews with the host and all that. I was like, oh, I don't remember me saying that. It's good. Okay. And then it was like showtime. And I was like, I made my own self cry. I was like, whoa, I did not realize it was a moment. And it was something I had been working towards since 2018, when I went to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society blood cancer conference, because my mother has blood cancer. She now has a rare blood cancer. So I'm always trying to inform myself. And one of their keynote, and it was a surprise, was Dan Shapiro. And I was all like, he made me cry. Like, I was like, that's what I want to do, because he was just up there, not just telling his story, but like a performance that brought you in, right? And I was like, that's what I want to do. And that's literally it kind of kicked up my advocacy of like, maybe someday I can get on that stage. And then it actually came true. But now I'm like, okay, I need more. I need more of these opportunities. So I'm working right now. I'm gonna write a one-woman show. Because every time I feel like I bring something up in the cancer space that makes people feel uncomfortable or whatever, sometimes it's like, you don't even need to respond. And so I really want to be able to express myself and be on stage again on my own terms. And so that's like my goal. But that moment on PBS, and then watching myself and actually making my own self emotional because of the emotion that I let out, I was like, I really hope this helps other people know that they are not alone. Because even when you do have friends and family around you, once you're in cancer land, it can still feel, kind of isolating.
Absolutely. We are running short on time here, so I think we're gonna wrap up, but we ask all of our guests our final first, where can everyone connect with you? Do you have an Instagram? We know you have the blog. Plug whatever you'd like.
PBS.
Yes.
I want the PBS recording too. Come on.
Yeah, that's right. Just find me on PBS. So you can find me on Instagram and Twitter, or X, or Twix, as I like to call it. Both of them are at Warrior Megsie. That's Warrior and then Megsie, or Life on the Cancer Train at warriormegsie.com.
Love that. Thank you so much. And then our final question that we ask everybody, from your experience, what does great support look like?
I literally have such a great example of that from yesterday. Great support looks like when I reach out to my friends, and I call them my cancer besties, when I'm in a dark place, when I am not doing well emotionally, and I reach out and they immediately write back, "We got you. You're not alone. Talk to us. We know you just want us to listen." I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you mean this? Wait, like, you actually love me? Like, I'm like your sister? Like, that to me is the beauty, of being in cancer land. Of It's so hard, but darn it, the friendships and the way our cancer besties show up for us and they embrace us when we are at our worst. That is how I view support in this space.
I love that so much. Thank you so much, Megsie. This has been incredible. You've shared so much. I would love to do a part 2 in the future, but for now, this has been another episode of the Support Report with Be Present. Thank you all so much for listening.